Well, the entire first base market decided to formulate over the course of the weekend. We also had a certain pitcher get $9 million, and it made me scratch my head. We also saw another pitcher get a 2-year deal, yada, yada, yada. There were a whole bunch of transactions, including a huge trade between the Marlins and the Phillies. And we are going to play GM with the Phillies and the Mets. I think it's going to be quick because we know the direction, and they've both been pretty active this offseason. But the transaction's going to take up the bulk of the front half of the show. Jack, Aram, Just Baseball show. Today is Monday, December 23rd. I'm going to steal a line from Chris Berman. Let us be the first to wish you a Merry Christmas. You will not hear from us on Wednesday. You're going to hear from us on Friday. But how was your weekend? Was it good?
I was going to ask you, how was your weekend, man?
I have a wording problem that I got to run by you.
Okay, let's hear it.
I got engaged.
Yes,
Um,
that's what I was.
and
I was hoping you wouldn't make me drop that like in the episode here. You did it. You got it out of the way there.
yeah,
Very
but
happy for you. Everybody in the YouTube comments, please wish Jack McMullen a congratulations on his engagement. Off the market now for good.
which is huge. Yeah, I'm off the market before Pete Alonso is. So, here's my thing though. I have a language question for you because I put out some photos on X, and my caption was perpetual 1+1 deal with player options at the conclusion of each season. And like, a lot of people are like, crazy caption. Are we sure this isn't a mutual option? We've talked about mutual options. Mutual options never get picked up. So
Yeah,
that means that
it
this
never
is going
get
to be
picked
short
up.
lived. My
Yeah.
thing is like, I have no incentive to breach this contract. Like, I don't ever plan on it. So, ball's in her court. Is that not fair wording, or would you word it in a different way?
So you said what player option? Well, it's not defined who the player is here in this
I
case.
would assume the other is the player, right? Because I was the one that got the ring. Like, I was the one
That
that
is true.
proposed. So wouldn't I be
That
the
is true.
club?
Yes, that is true. I mean, dude, it still popped. Wow, I'm looking at it right now. Um, yeah, that is a good question. Well, yeah, mutual option would have been a waste. That's more of a formality, and a mutual option essentially implies that it's not going to be picked up because,
Yeah,
like you said, like mutual option, I don't think has been picked up since like 2013 or something like that.
right.
And someone can fact check that, but I'm pretty close. I'm pretty sure it's been more than a decade since a mutual option's been picked up. Definitely has been more than 5 years. I know that for a fact.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would be like almost implying that it wasn't going to get picked up. I like the 1+1 deal. I think this can be one of those just fruitful 1+1s that just keep going plus 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 plus. But yeah, you got this. You signed the Boris special.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's usually what happens, right? When the market, not as many options out there for you, so
Yeah.
you buy low there, and I think Bell settled for you here and
No
took the
doubt.
1+1 deal.
No doubt. I'm fine with a superstar settling with me. And here's the thing, like,
hmm
the money's
That's
right.
actually why you nailed the analogy. It's actually perfect. A superstar was canvassed the market, settled for
Like,
you, and took the best deal that was available at the time. Probably should hire. She should probably hire a better agent, but for now, she's stuck with you.
it is equivalent to Otani signing with the Angels in international free agency. I will say that you're signing up for a sinking ship, but like, you might be into it. I have no idea. I will say the money's always going to be right. So it's like, unless she has a 1250 OPS, I think she's going to stay
Yeah.
in this contract. So we'll see what happens here, and it'll be good. So
I'm
I
very excited, very happy for you guys, though, on a serious note. And
appreciate it.
I know it's been a long time coming. You guys have been doing the distance thing with your unique careers, or studying to be a doctor, you broadcasting in all these different spots. And I know it's been really special for you guys to be together over the last few months now, being in the same place after doing the long distance thing. And no better time, I think, to hitch it there. So I'm really pumped for you guys.
I appreciate you, man. It means a ton. Speaking of marriage between player and organization, how about $9 million for Michael Soroka on
I
Thursday night?
I thought you were going to bring up Alex Reyes. I was going to say
No,
your
do you want
last
me
week and
to?
my last week have been very different, and I actually want to talk about the Alex Reyes thing when we get to the
Okay.
Mets portion of the of of the episode. Yeah, I would say your last 7 days, you just solidified a special moment with your significant other for to build the rest of your life with her, and I got publicly humiliated. So we'll get into that, but no, that
Yeah, but like,
Soroka.
who knows? Okay, let me ask you: if I put literally a million baseball fans in a room, how many of them know what a UPC is?
No,
I didn't know what
I
that
legit
was.
think like a handful, a handful.
I had
Uh,
no idea what that was, and we've been doing this podcast for 4 years, and I've been a diehard baseball contract dork for the last 15.
yeah,
No idea
well,
what that was.
that's a great teaser. We'll get into it on the Mets side. I learned a lot of new things by watching that report. So for Mets fans that are coming into the playing GM saying, "Oh wait, I know that face. That's the guy that lied to us about Alex Reyes." I'll
That's
explain
Benedict
if you didn't
Arnold.
see the Twitter post.
Yeah.
I'll get into it. But so Soroka, I kind of like it. Is that edgy of me to say like,
So
oh, like surprising expensive deal? I like it because a smaller market team took a shot. I was kind of floored with the Soroka that we saw over the final month and change, 2 months.
yeah, so let me lay the ground. Let me try and go into your mind and say, okay, why does Aram like it? Aram likes it because he moved to the bullpen, and in 16 relief appearances, he had a 2.75 ERA. In 36 innings, he K'd 60. Opponents hit 189 against him, and he was sitting 95, 96, which is something we've never seen from Soroka. So I feel like that's why you like it.
Hmm.
Counterpoint is he started 9 games and he was 0-5 with a 6.39 ERA. So like they signed him to be a starter. That was in the initial report. Like he is going to be a starting pitcher for them. You know that he can succeed when he ticks up to 95, 96. But I wonder if he can take that mojo from the bullpen at the end of the year and put that right back into his starting rotation. That's my one concern.
Yeah, and I guess they are paying him to a degree to do so. It's kind of this similar conversation that we were having with, um, just kind of experimenting with guys that had some success as a reliever, and then maybe trying them as a starter. If it doesn't work, you can move them back into the bullpen. It's a little bit different with Soroka because, of course, he was a starter
Yeah.
before all of these injuries, the Achilles going on him, and then messing it up again during rehab and all that stuff. But I part of me thinks it's a buy low upside opportunity for a guy that just the more removed he is from the catastrophic injury, maybe the more he's starting to get back to being himself. But at $9 million, if you move him back to the bullpen, probably a little bit more than you wanted to give him. But if he ends up even being anything close to a number 4 starter, I think you feel really good about that. But I'm with you. The portion of that is a bit surprising to me is I think the reason why he was successful in relief was because he could lean more into the 2 pitch thing. Didn't need to be as much of like the ground ball guy that he had been in the past when he was more successful as a starter, and really leaned into just having a riding fastball that was up a tick and I think even jumping a little bit more because of the way he was able to spin it when he's throwing harder and shorter spurts. I like him as a reliever a lot. I don't know if I like it as much in terms of translating into the bullpen, because again I think a big reason why he had the success was the four seamer started to really dominate down the final stretch of the year, both in the zone, chase numbers, and then that allowed the slider to play up off of it. He still doesn't really have that third pitch, so yeah, it's surprising if they're planning on using him as a starter. I didn't read up on it. Is that the goal here? Is
Yeah,
that what they're planning to do?
that was what I saw was that it was going to be used as a starting pitcher. Let me find the exact report. Yeah, I mean it was in the trade rumors write up from Derek McDonald. The ISE baseball client will reportedly be used as a starter. He's
If they can,
27 years old
yeah,
and he's done it. Like I feel like there's reason to believe that he found something good in the bullpen and he can expand that over 6 innings. And if he's a five and dive guy, that's cool. They have a billion five and dive guys in Washington.
yeah. And I think ditching the sinker for him was huge.
Yeah.
And again, really leaning into that four seamer. So maybe they feel like now working off of that, this new Mike Soroka is a guy that's going to go four seam slider. Let's find him a third pitch. The changeup was inconsistent. Maybe he can find a bigger curveball. There's clearly a plan here, I think. And I know plenty of teams had interest in Soroka, given the way he finished the year and given just his history of being a guy that proved that he can get outs at a really high level when he was healthy. I'm sure different teams had different pitches for him in terms of, this is what we think your arsenal can look like with us. Like, this is what we think you can unlock. And presumably the Nationals maybe were able to sell him on something. So I'm interested to see how he comes into this year with that third pitch. That's going to be the big thing to watch. But that four seamer is a legit pitch now, and that slider works well off of it. So at the very least, you've got a 2 pitch mix that'll play in the bullpen, and at $9 million, you could still move him at the deadline, and I'm sure teams would be plenty interested.
Yeah. Giving you a peek into my editorial idea. I tried stacking the show from least sexy transaction to most sexy transaction. So we're going to talk about Luzardo last. We talked about Mike Soroka first. I feel like it was kind of a toss up in overall sex appeal between Mike Soroka and Gio Urshela signing with the A's. But I found it a little bit more intriguing because we talked about this on the A's GM episode. I floated Yohan Moncada. I think Gio Urshela is essentially the same thing right now, and that is essentially a time buyer if Daryl Hernandez is not ready on opening day. It's one for 2.15. Incentives can run it up to 2.65. But this really just felt like hey, we're ready to put a lot of eggs in the Hernandez basket. We're not ready to put all of them there on opening day in 2025.
Yeah, and I think this is a team that now we've talked about it with a little bit of pitching intrigue and the young bats that they have, you can talk yourself into them, hanging around a little bit and playing some competitive baseball. So I think to elevate the floor a bit more is definitely helpful. And a guy that can kind of move all over the infield for them, can still plug in short in a pinch, can pretty much play every spot in the infield if you need it. I think at the very least, too, you have a guy that can be a utility piece, and you hope he does. He's a utility piece for you because that means Ernaya stepped up, and I still believe he can be a guy. I think last year kind of got away from him, but I think he's also an insurance policy to Zach Geloff as well, who
Mhm.
was not good last year, and you're hoping he bounces back. But if he doesn't, you want to have somebody else out there that you can plug in and give you at least replacement level or slightly above that, ability on if you combine the defensive and offensive side of things. And even though it wasn't a great year for Urshela last year with the defensive ability that he has, he's going to be a little bit better than replacement level. So I think it elevates their floor. Whereas this is an A's team that isn't interested in losing 100 games again this year. I think that's very clear. It doesn't do good for anybody
Yeah.
on this ball club. We talked about the value of the Royals, and I don't think they're there yet, obviously, at all. But before this past season, we talked about the value of the Royals, just even giving themselves a shot to play some meaningful games down the
Yeah.
stretch of the year. I think there's a lot of value to that with this A's team, especially if the goal is to be competitive in the next couple of years. To not just be a gaping hole at certain spots and bleed your way to 90 losses again. I
Yeah.
think elevating the floor is definitely helpful. And all of a sudden, you look at this roster. And look, that are they a great team? No, but there's not areas where you can look at and be like, geez, that's a gaping hole. Like, oh,
Yeah.
why is that guy starting there? Like, I mean, it definitely elevates the floor a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think that exists in their offense anymore. I think that it exists in the back of their rotation, but previously it was the entirety of their
Entire
starting
rotation.
rotation.
Yeah.
And that was a problem. Like that was a real problem that JP Sears was going to be your guy. And now you've got Sevy and Springs, and you probably have to add one more financially. And then you get to a JP Sears and an Estes and a Mitch Spence, which is good. And final thing, respect bench bats. Like not every team can have it in Bundo Sosa, but Gio Urshela is like the Kmart Sosa, and everybody needs a Kmart Sosa. Like
Yeah.
it just makes your big league club a little bit better.
100%. I want to make one little prediction too. I think Jack Perkins is going to get
Yeah.
up and help that rotation within the first few months of the year. I love the way that guy finished the year.
So the other name that kind of goes hand in hand with Jack Perkins is Mason Barnett. Is he in that area too?
Absolutely. I
Okay.
think timeline wise, it's going to kind of be a race there between those two guys. And they also have Gunnar Hoglund, who looks like he could be an innings eater.
Added to the 40. Yeah.
JT Ginn looks like he could be a back end of the rotation guy that could eat some innings. They added Ryan Cusick to the 40 because I think they believe that he can get outs at least as a bullpen arm.
Yeah.
They've got Osvaldo Bido, who looks like he could be again another maybe back
Swingman.
end or middle relief type of guy. Like
Yeah.
they've got some bodies there that it's a lot better than it was a year ago. And then Barnett and Perkins, both guys that I think could be in AAA to start the year,
Yeah.
are both guys that are better than all of those players that I just mentioned that I think could be solid number 4 types, as soon as, a couple months into the season.
Yep. Next one is Patrick Sandoval, the former Angels lefty. Is going to miss the majority of the 25 season while recovering from Tommy John surgery, but he signed a 2-year, $18.25 million deal with the Boston Red Sox. He's getting 5.5 this year. He's getting 12.75 in 2026. This is really similar to the Brandon Woodruff thing in Milwaukee, where the Red Sox are paying him a little bit of money to rehab with him and possibly get on the roster in September. And then they're paying him a decent bit of money to pitch for them in 2026. It's a bet on recovery. This, I feel like, is a less risky bet than Woodruff because Woodruff was a shoulder and Sandoval is Tommy John. You feel pretty good that a guy from TJ can come back and be good, year and a half removed, especially from his first. Pat Sandoval is a guy that I think you watch him pitch, you wonder why the numbers aren't better. And I think the Red Sox had to identify something in his arsenal and say, you know
Mhm.
what? This can correlate to good numbers for you. And just like they had Giolito last year, I think they're going to do the Giolito thing in 24-25, and they're doing the Sandoval thing in 25-26.
And a guy that I think, is still trying to kind of sort out between his two fastballs. Like his four seamer, he threw, a little bit more, still has a sinker as well. And I think just trying to figure out how to sequence those more, maybe lean into the sinker more and throw the four seamer less. Like it's an interesting, I think, just arsenal in general. It's
Yeah.
5 pitches that I think, like you said, the Red Sox probably have an idea of how they want to tweak some things potentially. His changeup, I'm looking at 2022, right? Where you mentioned that you think the numbers would be a little bit better. We saw that in 22, where he pitched to a 2.91 ERA in 148 and 2/3 innings. But even what he did in 2023, I think is something that the Red Sox would happily take. They just needed starting pitching depth. That pitching to a 4.11 ERA would even be fine, over 140, 150 innings. But I definitely think he's a candidate that the Red Sox feel like they could tweak some things arsenal wise when he comes back and get him right. But the slider and changeup combination give him a really good shot to get back to where he was. And you figure just getting healthy. I think that was a big part of his struggles in 2024 before we're going down. I'm really interested to see how he comes back, but he's in a great spot to rehab and get an opportunity where there's still plenty of space for him in that rotation by the
Yeah,
time he comes back. And I think it also sets them up well for next year and beyond.
I think so, 100%. This is not an official transaction, but it was reported by Mark Feinsand, John Denton, and Brian Hoke. Brian Hoke in New York, John Denton in St. Louis, and Feinsand obviously does a great job nationally. They reported that earlier this offseason, after it was made clear that Nolan Arenado rejected a trade to the Houston Astros, Arenado for Marcus Stroman was on the table, and they approached Nolan about it, and Nolan, pardon, the Cardinals declined an offer for
Yeah.
Arenado for Marcus Stroman straight up. I read that, and I was like, I get it from the Cardinal perspective because Stroman costs a lot of money. Stroman costs a
Yeah.
lot of money. Are the Cardinals ready to take on money for that? I feel like they're trying to get cheaper as they move forward.
Yes.
And
Yeah. I think
that
that
like
that seems to be the clear thing here is
yeah,
this year, like apparently this year because of the RSN issues for them as well. Like they need to cut payroll this year, according to everything I've read.
yeah. It just felt like Stroman could have been not a net neutral, but it felt like he could have provided that, innings eater that St. Louis loves to have there. And it's like, oh, yeah, we still have ideas of competing in 2025. This tells me that instead of trying to put together a net even product from 24 to 25, they're trying to get cheaper and actually do the whole rebuild thing.
No doubt. I think, and I think they should. Like,
Yeah.
if they're going to go about it that way, yeah, I think you're better off moving Arenado to a place where you can get, some prospects back. I'd imagine that there had to be some prospects maybe involved in that deal still too. Like, I would be pretty surprised if it was just like the 1-for-1 swap, or else
Yeah.
it almost doesn't make sense to move Arenado before the season. I'd almost rather wait and see
Right.
how he does at the start of the year and see if he can rebuild some of that value. Because if he's that down in terms of the industry perspective of his value, I don't get why you would just move him. Like the contract I know isn't great. I don't think it's an absolute like I don't think it's a weight to the degree that maybe some are discussing it as. Like if he's anywhere slightly above like average offensively, I still think that that's a contract they can move relatively easily. But at this point, it seems like not a lot of teams are lining up for that. I
Yeah.
get it to a degree, but it seemed like the Astros were interested,
Yeah.
and that was another side of it. I know that's the next thing you were going to get to, where he nixed it in the meantime,
Yeah.
which that would have made things very interesting. You move Paredes over to first base, expedite that whole process that you were talking about in the future, anyways, when Cam
Yeah.
Smith gets up, and that's a perfect time buyer for Cam Smith. But the problem with the guys having, certain players having the no trade clause is that it really does put the team that has him currently in a tough position because the teams that are maybe making an offer, like the Yankees or a handful of others, they know that there's not much leverage to be had for the Cardinals, right? Like,
Right.
not only do they have a contract that's going to weigh him down a little bit, they have a player who is already narrowing it down to a handful of teams that he's willing to waive the no trade clause for. So, if you're the Yankees, you say take this or nothing. Good luck trying to get a better offer from the two or three other teams that are semi interested but not that interested. They're only interested because they have found out that Arenado is going to waive his no trade clause for
Right.
them. So might as well do your due diligence. It kind of puts them in a stuck position.
In 2 months, it's going to be Arenado for Kyron Paris, and he's going to be in LA. I feel pretty confident about that, to be totally honest with you.
That makes a lot of sense. If there's one team that doesn't care about the contract, I'd imagine it's the Angels.
I would think so. You mentioned that Astros, block trade from Arenado. He used the no trade clause to block a trade that was essentially confirmed by St. Louis and Houston. My question is why, but the follow up is my immediate reaction was he may still look at the Astros and see 2017. Is that weird to say? Like, why would you not want to be a part of the Astro machine right now?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. And
It
that,
does
that
kind of feel like that old guard of baseball still looks at the Astros and says cheater. To be honest, like that was
you
my
think that's what it
initial
was?
reaction. The way you say no is if you still are saying, "Oh, that's the team that cheated."
Yeah, I think I'm reading like the Athletic article on it too, and it's like according to multiple team sources, Arenado did not want to rush into a decision and preferred to wait until more of the third base market was established. That could backfire.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
you could end up being an angel. Like that's where it could be, or you could be stuck on this Cardinals team that's rebuilding. So
And dude, your power is dissipating. Go use the Crawford box. Like there's a lot of endearing qualities about playing for the Houston Astros right now if you're Nolan.
yeah, that is really surprising. And after the moves that they just made, right? I mean, to go get some pieces there, they've got their first baseman now. I don't know what it would all look like though, because again, you wouldn't be able to slide Paredes to first now because I don't know what came first there in terms of like
It
the
was the
trade
Arenado report. It was the Arenado report that came
came before
before
the Christian
the
Walker
thing that we're going
signing.
to
So
talk
I
about.
don't know
Yeah,
if that all but cooks it now too.
it
But to
has
that
to.
point, like he may have just cost himself one of his better landing spots because you could have been playing third base for a team that, yes, they lost Kyle Tucker, but they've already made it clear that they're going to keep Framber now. They added Paredes, who we just talked about, feel like is going to fit like a glove there. They have some talent still, like throughout that roster. They can very easily still hang around and be pretty competitive, and you could help elevate them.
Yeah.
Now, again, maybe it's still on the table and they can mix and match and figure something out. But now it seems like that ship may have sailed, and you just trimmed your options down even further to a few, and a few of those teams, clearly the Yankees aren't interested in giving up a ton if that's their offer, if it's Stroman. Like I do think that Arenado may have passed on one of his best opportunities. I think geography clearly has a big part to play in this because if
Yeah.
you look at the teams that he said he'd waive his no trade clause to, there was definitely a theme there.
Yeah.
But man, I mean that's a pretty good option for a lot of reasons. I agree with you.
Yeah. Um, we are still a couple transactions away from first base. We're going to take our break right before the first base domino effect. But the next thing that I want to talk about is a trade between the Yankees and the Reds. And it was kind of a head scratcher, to be honest with you. Jose Trevino, former Platinum Glover and the backup catcher for the Yankees, is now no longer a Yankee. Trevino goes from the Yankees to the Reds for Fernando Cruz, the reliever, and Alex Jackson, the catcher, who is a non roster invite to spring training. Did you say this has to be the first non roster invitee to get traded?
I just said I was asking when do you think the last time a non-roster
No
invitee's
idea.
been traded? I don't know. I can't remember. I'm sure there's been a time, but it can't be very often where a non-roster invitee is traded. Also, it's the fifth time that Alex Jackson has been traded.
Mm.
That's crazy. So 5 times before his 29th birthday, I think the player that's been traded the most in MLB history is Jesse Chavez, 10 times.
Okay.
Alex Jackson's got a shot. He's got plenty of game left.
Yeah.
I think this is something that he could do.
The thing
He's
is,
got a
like,
chance.
Jesse Chavez was 40. Like, a catcher can't play till he's 40.
Yeah, yeah. Well, maybe the backup the backup catcher can play till he's 37, 38.
Yeah, like Brian Hoyer. Yeah.
I hope he gets moved around a few more. No, not for his sake, honestly. I hope he settles in somewhere and it has a fruitful career. But 5 times is pretty nuts.
That is.
Yeah, it was a surprising deal. I get it because there's wrinkles to it where Trevino hits lefties well, really good receiver and blocker, which with Tyler Stevenson as your primary catcher, I get it.
Yeah.
But very much struggles to limit the running game. I think one of the slowest pop times in Major League Baseball. And it's not like he's cheap. I would have thought that you could have acquired him. He's owed $3.6 million this year, which is not crazy expensive, but it's not like teams are, barging down the Yankees door to go pay their backup catcher $3.6 million for 1 year. I felt like you could have got Trevino for a couple lower level lottery tickets, if that. And instead, I know a very frustrating arm. Reds fans made it very clear to me that Cruz is a very frustrating arm who is unusable down the stretch, blah, blah, blah. I understand. However, he also had the third highest strikeout rate in Major League Baseball among pitchers with 50-plus innings. And I don't think it's a coincidence that one of the best bullpen development teams right now in the game that we have right now identified Cruz as a guy that they may be able to get right and be another success story in this Yankees bullpen, which, by the way, there's a success story in the Yankees bullpen right now that was formerly a Red in Luke Weaver. So is it a trade that's going to end up costing you if you're the Reds? Probably not. But I just don't value backup catcher to that degree. And I'm not trading an arm. And another thing I said was with upside. And what upside? He's 34. It's relievers. It's single year upside that they could have. He could show up next year, clean up his fastball, stop throwing that cutter that I don't know why he throws, and all of a sudden he has a 2.5 ERA over 60 innings.
Yeah.
And you would take that every day of the week over a backup catcher. And by the way, if he does that, you have him under control for several more years, whereas Trevino is going to go hit free agency, and that's that. So I just think there's so many other ways that you could fill backup catcher, a role that teams usually don't give up assets to address.
Yeah.
And I know it's not a super valuable asset, but I'd rather have traded Zach Maxwell and another flyer in the minor leagues than a guy that, as frustrating as he was, and I understand the numbers weren't great, he still struck out 37% of batters in the second half too.
Yeah, I understand. I viewed this as Nick Krall looking at Trevino not as a backup catcher, but as a 1B to Tyler Stevenson's 1A.
Yeah.
I think he's going to catch a lot more than your typical backup would.
Yes.
And I think, we hit the end of the season, and a typical backup will, catch 45 games over the course of a season. Mm-hmm. Starters are going to catch 110 to 115. I think Tyler Stevenson's probably going to catch about 95 to 100, and Trevino catches the other, 70 games that are left on the table. So if he does that, and Stevenson, DHs a little bit, and really just, kind of gets off his feet because, he's dealt with that over the course of his career as well. I think it makes a little bit more sense, but I don't know what that offensive production is going to look like from Jose Trevino, because sometimes it's sneaky good and sometimes it's this bat can't be in our lineup right now.
Yeah. I think you do bring up a good point on the other side of it, which is Tyler Stevenson has historically had a lot of injury issues, and you don't want to go into the season and then when Tyler Stevenson goes down, say, oh, shit, we got to roll out
Shit's Creek
Alex
without
Jackson.
a paddle if you don't have a catcher. Like, their catching depth is really not good. Who's next? Matt Nelson?
Yeah, I don't even know where they would go from there. Like Chucky Robinson, bring him back. Like,
no, he's an angel now, right?
I said bring him back.
Eric Yang, is he still there? Your guy.
Who?
Eric Yang.
Oh, Eric Yang. Yeah, he got an at bat last year.
Yeah.
It's from that perspective, I get it. And like, if your starter goes down, who again has had some injury concerns in his career, and Tyler Stevenson, at least Trevino goes in there and he's one of the better backups in the way that he's going to handle the staff, especially against left-handed pitching. He can hold his own. So I get it from that lens. I just think you could have addressed backup catcher without parting with a piece from the big league squad. And it's not like the Reds have a ton of bullpen arms to part with. I think if they move Graham Ashcraft to the bullpen, which we talked about they should do anyways, I think in the GM episode, and they go out and sign another bullpen arm or two, then I get it. And I think
Yeah.
that can make a lot more sense. But if they don't address the bullpen further, then I think that makes it a head scratcher.
I was saying, I think they need to have an honest conversation with Graham Ashcraft, with Lyon Richardson, and with Connor Phillips. And all
Mm-hmm.
three of those guys should enter spring training being relief arms.
And I think two of them at least could be really good relief arms as soon as next year, especially Ashcraft. I mean, we talked about it like that fastball, it's really a cutter. And when he leans into it, it's one of the closer moving pitches velocity wise to Class A's cutter.
Yeah.
Like if he leans into that further, in shorter spurts, I think it could really play up and he could end up being one of their better high leverage arms.
And then all of a sudden, Phillips throws 100, and if he can find the strike zone, like we could be actually cooking with gas.
Yep.
And you've got Phillips and Maxwell, and you can get back-to-back innings at 101, which
Yep.
is a sight to see.
I also
La-
forgot Will Banfield is also
oh,
a Cincinnati Red now too, so he could have been the backup as well.
still up Shit's Creek without a paddle, unfortunately. Last non-first baseman we got to talk about. Max Kepler is a Philly, and he signed a one-year, $10 million deal. Hand up, I did not view that as a deficiency on the Phillies roster. They probably got better, but they added a lefty hitting corner outfielder with pop. I just keep looking at center field. I'm like, fix that, fix that, fix that. Is the answer Marsh now?
I think the answer might be Marsh and Rojas as a platoon,
Okay.
or just Marsh in general. And I think we'll get to that in the
Yeah.
GM episode. But what I do think it means is a diminished role for Nick Castellanos. And you know what? If this team wants to put its best foot forward, as much as I love Nick Castellanos, it's probably with Nick Castellanos not playing as much. He has his moments in the postseason. He's a big part of the clubhouse. Yeah, I think it's when he's hot, he's hot for sure. But this is a guy that I think at this stage of his career is best off being in the short side of a platoon and mashing lefties, and that's what he still does. You know, if you
Yeah.
include the postseason, he had an 825 OPS against left-handed pitching last year. Righties, it was 724. I also think a big part of what knocks Castellanos down from a value standpoint is the more you put him out in the field, the more that WAR is going to take a hit because he's just brutal out there. So if you have Nick Castellanos in the short side of the platoon, mashing lefties and then spot starting here and there and coming off the bench, like he's gonna, it's definitely not what you wanted when you paid him the contract that you paid him, but you already paid it. You know, you already signed the deal. It's too late. He signed the UPC and or he signed the agreement and the UPC.
Yeah, good.
So it's locked in, right? I think ultimately that's what it told me. You upgrade defensively and you create a platoon here that could be pretty nasty, honestly. I thought Kepler was he was going stale in Minnesota a little bit.
Yeah.
I think now putting him in Citizens Bank Park, I'm really excited to see what he does this coming year. And I do think this could be a nice bounce back opportunity for him.
Yeah.
$10 million I thought was a pretty good deal. And I imagine that he may have had some offers for a little bit more. And I think this just might have been an opportunity to join a team that has World Series aspirations and have a pretty clear role. That again, I think is going to be playing corner outfield, elevating their defensive ability out there. And, I think in case of emergency, still capable of plugging into center if you absolutely need.
You kind of got me fired up for a Kepler Castellanos platoon.
It's pretty fun.
It's not good defensively, but big.
Kepler's better. Kepler can go get it a little bit. I'm looking at like outs above average 4.
Oh, okay.
2022, he had 12 outs above average.
Okay. Yeah.
But it's been 4 each of the last 2 years.
Sign me
That's
up.
a far cry from Nick Castellanos. So it would be a pretty significant defensive upgrade.
I'll give this 5 big booms, no doubt.
All right, I'll roll with it.
We're going to get to the domino effect of first baseman, including one that literally just broke as we record on Sunday evening. But before that, a quick break. Again, the dominoes are falling at first base. And let's start with the first domino. That was a trade, and it was Josh Naylor. Josh Naylor goes from the Cleveland Guardians to the Arizona Diamondbacks for Slade Cecconi. Slade Cecconi is a guy that had some prospect pedigree, that threw, 77 innings this year at an ERA in the mid-6s.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure Cleveland saw something and they liked it. And I don't want to fall into the habit of, oh, Cleveland grabs a pitcher, they're going to be awesome. I don't want to do the Rays thing with the Cleveland Guardians because I think that's unfair to any team that trades with the Rays and trades with the Guardians. But Arizona fills the Christian Walker hole by only committing to 1 year. Essentially what I'll spoil it. Houston is paying with Walker, although it shouldn't be spoiled. I'm sure you guys saw it. Um, with what Houston is paying Walker, they're doing the Naylor money over 3 years, and you get Naylor for one. Saccone to me was surplus on this team.
Mhm.
I understand that he could have been a depth relief arm, but you just don't need that. There are guys in Reno that are hanging out that could do the Saccone thing, especially with Trey Jameson coming back.
That's
You
the
were
big
fine.
that's the big
Yeah,
thing right there. Is Jameson coming back? If Trey Jameson wasn't coming back, I think it's a different conversation because Zaccone, it's still just 25 years old, and if you look at the stuff, and not just saying this because he was traded to the Guardians,
right.
I even know like there was a lot of conversation just about how you can get this guy's arsenal right, tweaks that you can make. I think the D-backs probably weren't jumping out of their chair to move him.
Yeah.
This was a guy that was drafted early, has shown things underlying data wise, like has some pretty intriguing characteristics to his stuff, and it's a pretty diverse arsenal. It's a four seamer that he can spin, a slider, a curveball, a splitter. Like he has a bunch of different looks that he can give you. It just didn't work for him last year at the big league level, but his fastball ticked up, in those shorter spurts, and he finished the year pretty well. There was a blow up against the Dodgers, but if you look at a lot of the individual outings in AAA and then the way that he finished in AAA, and even some small spurts at the big league level, I think he was a lot better than the numbers may indicate. And again, there was just a few blowups early in the year that really racked that ERA up against some good offenses.
Yeah.
But I do think this is a guy that just changes scenery, or even the D-backs new pitching coaches that they had there, I'm sure had some intrigue in being able to work with him and get him right. But when you get an opportunity here to upgrade your lineup and fill a spot that you had a clear hole in now that after
Yeah.
losing Christian Walker, I don't think you blink at moving at Ciccone when you have, again, Trey Jameson coming back, who is significantly better than him at this point. And also you move a comp pick that I don't think you're going to lose sleep over. It's comp B. And if Josh Naylor has a pretty good year, you can QO him. And if he turns that down and signs elsewhere, you now have a comp A pick
Yeah.
potentially that you're getting back too. So I liked it for both parties. And then the moves that the Guardians made after it, I think really hit home that it was a good move for them as well.
Absolutely. It's thanks for your help over the last couple of seasons. Thanks for the memories, but go do your thing in Arizona, and we're going to get a little bit cheaper, and we think a little bit more optimized. But with Saccone, I honestly played the do I want him or game, and Gallon, Kelly, Erod, Fott, Ryan Nelson. That's your five in your rotation. I'm not taking Saccone over any of them. Jordan Montgomery at the price point, like no, but Montgomery's immovable, so you just roll with it. Dre Jameson, I prefer him. And then I get down to a Gilbert Diaz. I think it's a toss up.
Yeah.
Mena, I side with Saccone, but not by much. Walston, I side with Saccone, but not by much. Tommy Henry, I side with Saccone, but not by much. So you take that clump of four, and you're already 6 or 7 deep at the big league level. And I'm just like, okay, you know what? You can move starter 8 on your depth
Yeah.
chart right now. And the fact that they got rid of starter 8 for a guy that can be an all-star bat in Naylor. He's not a good defender at all, but he can hit. He can give you a 120 WRC plus.
Yeah.
You do that every day of the week and twice on Sundays.
And for the Guardians side, right, you get an arm here that when he moved to the bullpen, fastball averaged 96 over
Yeah.
his final 15 appearances, and he landed it for a strike at a 75% clip. The slider ticked up to 86, and he was pitching really well with that pitch as well. 70% strike rate there. Now that's an arm that you can plug into the bullpen, and I think he can have some success there, but also could be a swingman and just gives them much needed depth with some of the injuries that they had, and with Bieber not readily available for the start of the season and things like that as well. And again, a guy that they can potentially unlock a little bit more out of. But to then pivot as well, you go sign Carlos Santana, who's the next transaction in this conversation, and you sign him for $2 million cheaper. You want to get Manzardo those ABs anyways. Manzardo probably fills the DH spot now. Santana's a good defender at first base somehow still at 38 years old, 39 years old. But Santana was a 3-WAR player because the defense was actually better. I think it was a 114 WRC plus. So like from that lens, if he can repeat anything close to a 110 to 114 WRC plus with his defense, I think you feel good about that, because instead you would have had Manzardo and Naylor kind of competing to see who looks like a DH the least.
Yeah.
And then one would be playing first base and the other would be DHing.
Yeah.
Now you have clear runway, I think, for Manzardo. I know Jhonkensy Noel is also going to fit into that puzzle as well, but Noel is actually not bad in a corner.
He can play
Um,
right.
yeah, he can play right and not bad at all. And the arm will compensate for any other limitations, but he moves sneaky good for how big he is. I think from a roster standpoint, this made a lot of sense. You got more pitching depth with which the Guardians still needed. You got a comp pick, which they're always going to welcome back.
Yeah.
They saved $2 million, which they can now allocate. You combine that with some of the savings from Jimenez. Maybe go sign somebody. They probably won't, but it just allows them to maybe do some things there. And you move off of a player a little bit earlier that you were going to lose in free agency anyways. And you may not have been able to give a qualifying offer to. Like, it could work in the Diamondbacks' favor, but he could, if he puts up a slightly diminished season from last year, I don't know if you give him the QO. So it's a unique spot. I think for both teams it made a lot of sense, and I think both teams came out in a better situation overall.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. And I was trying to figure out the puzzle piece. We're just moving to Santana now, understandably. So Santana, I think it works seamlessly. And you mentioned Jhonkensy Noel. Big Christmas gets ABs. He proved that he's getting ABs more often than not. So I look at the Guardians depth chart, and I kind of see it as this. Center field is going to be this hodgepodge. I think Will Brennan, who is slated, if you look at like roster resource, he's slated to start in right. I think he's going to start in center. He's going to be the opening day center fielder, and then you mix in guys like an Angel Martinez could play some center field, a Schneeman could play some center field. I think you've got a platoon in right field whenever Chase DeLauter is ready, and that's DeLauter playing right field against right-handed pitching, and you've got Jhonkensy Noel playing right field against left-handed pitching. That creates a platoon. You don't need DeLauter seeing lefties at all. And Noel, obviously, is going to mash against lefties. The weird wrinkle here is Carlos Santana is really good against lefties. He's really not good against righties.
Yeah.
Last year, he had a 934 OPS against left-handed pitching. He had a 676 OPS against right-handed pitching. So the question is, how do you get Big Christmas his ABs? And how do you get Carlos Santana in the lineup every day against lefties? Is it Manzardo gets it off left on left and Noel then DHs?
I think so. I think Manzardo is definitely a guy that I think you can shelter from lefties as well too. And that Stephen Vogt's probably excited about how he can mix and match this in ways that they can figure it out. But I think that is what kind of allows them. I think they're going to platoon their way like 2022. Was it 2022 San Francisco Giants style? And I think it can work. I think it can work because they have a lot of different guys that can hit you 15 plus home runs all of a sudden now in these platoon roles. I mean, Manzardo easily could. I think, Noel very easily could. You look at Santana, he very easily could. And I know you want a little bit more out of him, but I think that's probably what it'll be at this stage. There's a lot of walks, around 15 home runs, and the good defense at first. I think if you're paying him 12 million and the Guardians, that's a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
I know at the end of the day, it's still a discount from what they were paying, and are slated to pay Josh Naylor. I imagine they're still going to want him to be in the lineup pretty consistently there.
Yeah.
But if it is a matchup that they just don't love for Santana, yeah, you can plug in Noel there. You can plug in Manzardo and then put Noel at the DH spot. Though I do think Noel, one of the most underrated parts of his game, is actually a good defensive first baseman.
Yeah.
So he has the versatility there as well. Like, I definitely think there's a lot of ways to mix and match here, and they just wanted to elevate the floor of this lineup. If you're going to move off of a Naylor and you don't want to feel that gap too much, and I think being able to add Santana, who hit 23 home runs and gets on base at a pretty good clip, like I think that's definitely something that helps them a ton. And being able to mix and match and plug and play, they're going to be creative there and figure it out. My only concern is if you do move off Elaine Thomas, I don't love Will Brennan's defense in center field.
Yeah.
DeLauter's a corner guy. You're definitely not putting him out in center field with his feet issues. I that's the one question I have. Like, is it then really focusing on developing Angel Martinez up the middle? Like, what is their plan up the middle? Also, remember, David Fry is going to come back. And that's a guy that, is he end up catching a little bit more? Do you put him in the corner outfield as well? Like, there's a lot of wrinkles here. It's a good problem to have, but I'm very fascinated to see how they plan to clear this all up.
So I read David Fry will not be playing the field in 2025.
At all, the whole season.
Yeah, when he comes back, which is around the All-Star break, he could really just hit, and that's it. So then you run into the tough question of if he's 100% ready to hit? Is that worth a roster spot if he doesn't supply any defensive versatility? And I could see the answer being no, and you just let him DH in Columbus. And if he's on a heater, you get him up and you just put him in the DH spot. But I feel like you've got enough guys on that roster already that could have hit the ground running through the first 3 months of the season. And it's like, do we really want to get, a green David Fry to the 2025 season in over a Manzardo, DeLauder, Noel combo?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm excited to see how they go about it. But the good news is like we haven't really had a Guardians lineup in a while where we're talking about all these different, intriguing, potentially above average bats that how do we fit them all in?
I know.
I think given that several of them are unproven or are coming off of breakouts in shorter spurts, like it's good to have more irons in the fire because unfortunately, it's just the way it is. Not all these guys are going to replicate or what they did last year and or achieve the potential that we've long assumed for some of them. So having more options, I think, is a big reason why the Guardians are going to have that depth and sort it out then.
This one's not complex at all. Christian Walker is a Houston Astro. 3 years, $60 million. Christian Walker is going to play every day. By the way, quick aside, 2021 San Francisco Giants.
2021.
22, they were like, 22 is when they started being the epitome of 500, and they were
Yeah.
actually 81 and 81, but they were 107 and 55, just platoon city. But Christian Walker, 3 years for $60 million with the Houston Astros. This guy has put up 3 consecutive seasons of essentially 3 wins or 4 wins. It was 3.9, 3.9, 3.0 in the F war department. And essentially 3 straight seasons of a 120 WRC plus. I think it was 122 and then back to back 119s. He is consistent offensively. He's a power threat. He's a right handed power threat in Houston. And he's the best defensive first baseman in Major League Baseball. This is a slam dunk. It complicates things once Cam Smith enters the fold because you've got 3 years of him and 3 years of Paredes, and then where is Cam Smith? But that's a great problem to have.
Yeah. I think they're more than happy to cross that bridge when they get there and
Yeah.
go from there, right? And Paredes is so young and still sneakily at 25 years old that maybe there's some moving around that can be had there, and maybe in a couple years, 36-year-old Altuve starts DHing a little bit more. Who knows? They'll figure that out when that time comes. But
Well, and the other one there is like maybe Jordan plays some corner outfield. Like Jordan's got some time to, shore up the corner outfield defense.
100%, especially in Crawford, at least even just at home games, play the Crawford boxes and just barely have to move out there. I think I could play the outfield out there. Yeah, with Walker as well. Like, the interesting thing is, after the concerns and the issues that they had, and they're still paying Jose Abreu, it was a little surprising to see them go this route. But this is a totally different circumstance here, where yes, he's going into his mid-30s, but other than having that little oblique tweak, like he still hits the ball as hard as ever. I think now he's a pull the ball in the air guy, and I think that's something that the Astros are always looking at who's going to fit best in their environment, especially after losing one of the guys that fits best in their environment in Alex Bregman. And this pretty much closes the door fully on Bregman. But putting him there, I mean, even in a year where he didn't play as much as we wanted to see because he was banged up, like he still hit 26 home runs. I think he could very easily hit 30 again there. And again, the defense being a huge aspect of this as well. We talked about how I thought if they're going for it this year, trading Kyle Tucker makes no sense. I still think it's hard to justify moving a guy that was on pace for 8 wins if you're really hell-bent on winning this year. However, this is maybe the most justifiable series of events to make it happen. They clear up $10 million by acquiring Paredes and moving Tucker just based on the money for next year alone. And remember, they don't really want to go over the luxury tax. They use those savings to now allocate towards adding Christian Walker to the fold as well. So now both corners are accounted for here.
Yeah.
And are they going to replace Kyle Tucker? No, but those two guys together, I mean, you could get 25 to 30 home runs from Paredes, and you can get 25 to 30 home runs from Walker. That's pretty darn good. And then you added the arm as well. They need to figure out the outfield side of things, but that's where I think it's also really fascinating. Zach DeZenzo is having a great winter league. He's in Puerto Rico, which is one of the lighter pitching winter leagues.
Yeah.
But DeZenzo, fringe top 100 prospect for us. I think it would have been a little ambitious to just have him plug in at third or first base for this team, given how premium those offensive spots are. But DeZenzo, he's been playing a lot of left in the winter league, or he was. You put him out in left, And I think that's a guy that at the very least could be a good platoon bat for you in one of the corners. So they have an internal option there. They have Jacob Melton knocking on the door as well. You figure Chas McCormick can't be worse than he was last year.
Yeah.
I still think they need one more outfield bat, and I'm curious how they go about that. But I feel a lot better about this team situation now. And I mean, they're no slouch.
I'll throw you some names right now if they did go about it on the free agent market, although I don't think that they will. I think that it could be a low level trade. Um, but I think Austin Hayes like could make some sense for a Houston. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like we're putting Austin Hayes on every team. It sounds weird, but at the price point, Verdugo could make some sense for the
Yeah.
Houston Astros. So like it's one of those where Verdugo's an easily dunkable player, but in the right situation, he could make a lot of sense. And I think that
Yeah.
this would be a decent fit for him. Like a Mark Canna could make some sense. But it feels like you want a little bit more athleticism out there. Those are the guys that kind of jump to my mind. I'm even thinking like a Michael A. Taylor or a Harrison Bader. But to be honest, I like the idea of a Verdugo a little bit better than that.
Yeah. Yeah. And they might be able to squeeze that in there and still stay under the luxury tax, especially if they can move Presley.
Yeah, no doubt. The next one, after Christian Walker signed with Houston, the Yankees wanted to work very, very quickly. And they set their sights on Paul Goldschmidt and Carlos Santana. They opted for Goldie. And Goldie is a New York Yankee for 1 year at $12.5 million. Yeah, 12.5. Jack Curry had that news at yes. Goldie finished the year very well in 2024. Goldie also looked very veteran in 2024. And I unfortunately don't mean that in the best way. He showed signs of age, and it was really hard to watch at the beginning of the 2024 season. But tell me why the bounce back is valid.
And you loaded that up for me. How did you know I even thought the
Because
bounce
I saw
back was
you
valid?
smile as I was dunking on him.
No, I think it's valid. I was kind of imagining some of the ABs that I saw, and I was like, man, there were some at bats where it looked rough,
Yeah.
like rough. Um, I think he can get to where he needs to be, just because rather than fading further in the second half of the season, we saw him actually perform better. And beyond that, when I was watching the matchups against velocity, that's where I really started to get concerned. I'm like, he's not quick enough to catch up to velocity. If you look at the second half numbers against 93 plus, he put together an 823 OPS against 93 plus in the second half. Like that was important because again, he was kind of getting his doors blown off at times against 93 plus. So that side of things is great. I think also just the way that he finished the season overall had to provide some optimism, and the EVs crept back up as well too. So I think that is also a positive wrinkle in this. I think the most important part here is it's a 1 year deal, and even if Goldie looks a little bit diminished, like if it's not looking as good as maybe we had hoped, he still hit lefties quite well last year, 295 with the 840 OPS against lefties. And if you go from the second half onward, his OPS was north of 1,000. It's a smaller sample size, but north of 1,000 against lefties. So that's at least the role he could fill. It's a little bit more than you'd want to pay for a platoon guy, but I think he brings a lot to the table there from a clubhouse perspective. I think at the very least he's mashing lefties, and I think you can hope that he bounces back enough against righties and velocity and keeps that second half momentum going. They don't need him to be MVP Goldie. If he's a 780 to 800 OPS, and then particularly still excels against lefties to where they can deploy him in those spots, I think it's still a good signing for them.
Yeah, I'm with you there, and I do think that they are going to figure out a way to deploy him, and I think like, you were never going to get Paul Goldschmidt for anything lower than that price point, just because like there's a whole bunch of intrigue there when it comes to name recognition. There's
Yeah,
gravity to Paul Goldschmidt, just like there's
no doubt,
gravity to Nolan Arenado. He's
no
not
doubt.
chump change.
My biggest concern though, the one thing I will say is, how he was looking sped up. It seemed like he had to make those swing decisions earlier too.
Yeah,
And when you're feeling slower, you got to decide earlier. And when you decide earlier, you're more likely going to make the wrong decision. So all of a sudden, he was expanding a little bit more. Like last year's walk rate of 7%, that's way down from what we're used to from Paul Goldschmidt. Even the year before, it was 12.5%. And the
yeah.
year before that, I'm pretty sure he was around like the 12% range as well. So
Mm.
that's the one thing is guys are aging. You don't want to see the swing decisions go in the wrong direction. So that's the one thing I am a little bit concerned about and want to see bounce back, because even in the second half, the swing decisions weren't much better. So that is something to monitor. But if you cue it up even more specific to the final 30 games,
Yeah.
he was really darn good. So I mean, OPS at 900 over the final 30 games. So the Yankees are betting on something clicking there.
Yeah. Last but not least, in the first base carousel, Nathaniel Lowe is a Washington National. This happened on Sunday evening, and the swap was Nathaniel Lowe goes from Texas to Washington for Robert Garcia, a left-handed reliever, 28-year-old, really good changeup, very good, commands it. He's 94, 95 with his fastball. His fastball's fine. The ERA is not, sexy by any means, but he was about 70 innings last year. He struck out 11 and a half per nine. He walked 2.5 per nine. Nathaniel Lowe, meanwhile, fills that first base need for Washington, and it was a need with a capital N-E-E-D. Nathaniel Lowe, over the last couple of years, has given you, since the start of the 2022 season, F-WARs of 3.1, 2.7, 2.8, and WRC pluses of 143, 117, 121. Home run total, they're down from 27 in 2022. He hit 17 in 23. He hit 16 in 24. But this is a guy that is a big man that is not going to K like most big men first basemen do. He walks a lot. It's a 13% walk rate each of the last two seasons. I wanted the Nats to go in and get Christian Walker. This is a very good plan B. Very
And I
good.
mean, this is a team that clearly wants to similar conversation that we're having, like these young players play some meaningful games. Don't go into the season saying, "Hey, it's just another going through the motions," and you're going to develop as individuals essentially, like you have been through the minor leagues. It's, hey, let's win some ball games and like let's send a message that we're trying to put together a team that can make some noise. And again, it would be a stretch to say that they are going to compete for a wild card spot, but you can now look at the lineup and say, okay, there's some pieces here, and these young guys have a little bit more to play for here all of a sudden. Um, First base to address it this way too is great. Where you still have to look at the big picture if you're the Nationals, and they're probably a couple years away from getting to where they fully need to be. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't try to put together a competitive team or semi-competitive team. So they find that balance here in trading for a bat without parting with pieces from the farm system. Yeah, you trade a bullpen arm, but I think they feel good about some of the arms that they were able to develop last year. And Eduardo Salazar, who looked really good in smaller spurts. Jose A. Ferrer, that guy was nasty. That guy was nasty last year, and he's only 24 years old. They added Derek Law to the fold. There's some intrigue there, and I think they could go out and maybe sign another bullpen arm. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they do. So from that lens, like I like it a lot. I mean, and for the Rangers, like I think when they went out and got Jake Berger, I felt like that the writing may have been on the wall there
Yeah.
for Nathaniel Lowe, and it just seems like it makes more sense for them from a financial standpoint as well. They saved them a lot of money, but they also needed to address the bullpen, and now they had a guy that was really good down the stretch. Last 20 appearances, he had a 2.95 ERA and a 1.28 FIP,
Yeah.
21 Ks, 2 walks. So I mean,
Yeah.
this is definitely a much needed bullpen piece for the Rangers, and I think they matched up really well here on a trade. But I love what Lowe brings now to this lineup. All of a sudden, you look at CJ Abrams, James Wood, Dylan Cruz, and instead of it being a pretty big drop off from there, you add Nathaniel Lowe, who can bridge it now then to a Luis Garcia and some of the other younger,
But I
kind of
like
tweener
Luis
guys.
Garcia. I don't love him, but I like him.
He's solid. He had a really nice year, and I like Luis Garcia a lot more when it's the fifth or sixth bat I mentioned
Right.
instead of the fourth.
Right.
So I mean, all of a sudden, this is not a bad team at all. And you
No.
round it out with Jacob Young, who's an elite center fielder. You have Jose Tana, who looks like he can run into some balls, but you also have some guys coming up to the minor leagues as well. Brady House not far away.
Yeah.
Juan Yepes looked pretty good in his
Mhm.
250 plate appearances. This team is coming together a little bit, and they've pieced together a semi-competitive staff now as well,
Yeah.
with what they've been able to add there too.
And it's a heck of a lot easier to find bullpen arms than it is find a first baseman, especially when tier one on the free agent market and tier two is essentially, drained up. Like the only first baseman that is tier one or tier two and still on the market is Pete Alonso.
Yeah.
If you were not going to get a Carlos Santana or a Christian Walker or anybody like that, you're starting to fish in a different pond, and it's not a great pond right now. Available first baseman, free agents: Justin Turner, Donovan Solano, Connor Joe, Joey Gallo, Anthony Rizzo, Ty France, Josh Bell, that's a different weight class than the guys
Yeah.
that just signed. So you didn't want to be in that trickle down group. I love that they found a creative avenue to stay in that tier two first baseman range.
100%. And also, like, I just don't think they're in a spot where like you're signing a vet like Christian Walker. What's that going to do for you? By the time his contract's up, you're going to just be ready to compete. I
Yeah.
could see the intrigue of throwing a lot of money at Pete Alonso. But what if you end up finding out that you have a deficiency in another spot, or there's a pitcher on the market that you'd rather throw
Yeah.
150 plus million dollars at when you have more clarity after this year? Like, I like that they're getting closer to competing and they're spending some money here. I mean, they
Right.
acquired, a $10 million contract here, and it's not going to get any cheaper the year after that as well with the 2 years of control. But I like the idea that they're approaching it with a little bit of aggression, but they don't necessarily need to throw a nine-figure contract out just yet
Yeah.
as they're building closer and closer to that more competitive ball club. I think for the Rangers, their other moves somewhat implied that they were going to need to clear 10 million, close 11 million, close to it off the books. When they brought Eovaldi back, when they made some of the when they signed Higashioka, I think that kind of made it clear. I love the way that Chris Young's operating, though. You go out and get a Jake Berger, who now is playing on the minimum, and you move Nate Lowe. Lowe's definitely a better player in terms of well-roundedness, but for 10 million less, when
Yeah.
you're able to use that money to address other spots, I think it worked out quite nicely for them. And again, they got a good bullpen piece too.
100%. Last and certainly not least, this was the best move of the weekend. Jesus Luzardo is a Philadelphia Philly. We had a feeling that Luzardo could be on the move, and for the last week and a half, we've been hearing that Luzardo and the Cubs are getting closer and closer and closer, and that it was dead. And now Luzardo is a Philadelphia Philly. It was Jesus Luzardo and Paul McIntosh, a catcher, going to Philly for Starlene Caba, who is a top 100 prospect at Just Baseball, and Amarion Boyd, who was a high school outfielder that was what, one full season into his pro career.
Yeah.
He really doesn't have much juice, but he can absolutely fly.
Hmm.
Kaba has the makings of a gold glove candidate at short with minimal juice, as it seems right now, but very
Yeah.
good plate discipline. You'll give us the 4-1-1. I'll leave it at the Luzardo Philly fit. Dude, I
Love
mean,
it.
wow.
Love it.
Flawless.
Love it. Love it. And, it's a guy that they've seen plenty of. So I'm sure they're very excited to acquire him. And uh, they're able to get their guy now. And they were in on Crochet. They wanted to do that, right? But that was going to require Aiden Miller going and other pieces and key pieces. And now you're able to get I'm not saying Luzardo's Crochet, but you're able to get a guy that could absolutely make a leap and if he's healthy and be that number two starter for you
Yeah.
and be a dog for you from the left side. And yeah, you gave up a good piece in Starlene Caba, but who cares if you're the Phillies? This is a guy that's just turned 19 years old, who's several years away,
Yeah.
and you have somebody above him in Aiden Miller, who's more offensively oriented, but is already that heir apparent, up the middle as well. And they have some other top prospects that I think they're have more uh, a closer proximity in a timeline that more
Yeah.
fits what I think Dombrowski's trying to do in this veteran core.
And you have another decade at Trey Turner. Let's not ignore
Yeah,
that.
exactly, exactly. But from the Marlins' perspective here, like I think fans are probably a little underwhelmed by it. I think you have to look at the situation in general. The arm issues, like Luzardo's dealt with several, and then this past year a back thing as well. And I think just from that perspective alone, with 2 years, yes, it's 2 years of control, and yes, it's reasonable, but it's not on the minimum. So with injury concerns and that side of things, like I don't think teams were just going to be lining up. And already this is a year where teams are a little bit apprehensive in terms of giving up, big time prospects. The Cubs and the Marlins, they conversed for a while. I think the deal obviously fell through because the Cubs probably weren't willing to part with Owen Casey, James Triantos, Kevin Alcantara. So for the Marlins to pivot, they have to trade in division. I get it. I don't think a team out there was going to give them a better prospect than Starling Caba. A year ago, yes, I'm pretty positive, and I'm pretty positive that the Marlins had better offers on the table last year. But you can't totally blame them because who would have saw it going exactly this way? They could have had better prospects last year, yes, but you pivot now, you cash in. You don't want to go into the season and risk it. We talked about that in the Marlins GM episode, especially when you're going to hold on to Sandy as well, anyways, throughout the beginning of the season. You get a guy that I think this organization sorely needed. He's the best defender in the system immediately. I think he's one of the best defensive infielders in minor league baseball. Uh, he's a number 72 overall prospect. He's one of the best bat to ball guys in the organization almost immediately. And the guy ran a chase rate of 13%. People are going to talk about the low A numbers and all that stuff. He was 18 years old last year as a switch hitting shortstop. He's a plus runner. I think the floor is so high with a guy like that, but
Yeah.
you put together plus contact skills and plus speed and potentially plus defense at short. The Marlins needed a guy like that really badly, and they got him. But I think it very clearly shows that the Marlins have no intent on competing within the next 2 years because they traded Luzardo to a division rival and they acquired a player who is more than 2 years away. But
Yeah.
I don't think we needed this trade for any of us to figure that out.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. It is funny though because like, yeah, it's interdivisional, but somehow it feels like the furthest thing from an
Yeah,
interdivisional
like
trade because
it doesn't really like
they're
it
just
doesn't
punching
really
in different
matter.
weight classes, man.
It
And
it doesn't matter.
it's the circumstances, like, that's how the cookie has crumbled, unfortunately for Miami, unfortunately for Philly at this point right now. But I mean, Miami, don't look now, but that group of top prospects is starting to look really formidable. And this
Yeah.
is a farm system that I think is certainly near the middle of the pack in Major League Baseball, maybe even top half in Major League Baseball.
I think it's getting to the top third now. You
Yeah.
had a Caba there too. Like the depth is getting pretty crazy. They've got a lot of really intriguing prospects, but you got to develop these guys now, and that's been a big investment for them now. Is
Yeah.
when Bruce Sherman says we're spending money, um, I think he needs to realize that people don't care that you got one of those like a couple of those pitching machines that simulate the major league guys, the
Yeah,
traject
but
machines. Like
yeah, but
I understand that those like two traject machines are more than the MLB minimum for a player. I think it combines to like $1 million, but it just fans are not going to care that you bought two traject machines. Like
but it
they're
matters. It's
not.
the little stuff that does matter there. And I
For
think
sure.
if
And
you
I
can
think it
spend,
matters. And it's something that the organization has not invested in the past. And I think it's going to put them in a good spot, especially now that they're loading up the farm system. But, I can understand why fans are, going back to quotes that are saying, oh, we're going to spend, we're going to be involved. And then, they do this. I think this is at least the way to go about it, where the previous regime, you were reloading on prospects without the infrastructure to maximize those prospects that you were trading your star players for, and then throwing your hands up in the air and saying, why didn't they pan out? Now you're in a situation where you have better development infrastructure. We don't know how good it is yet, but I can guarantee you it's a lot better than it was. And now when you're acquiring this young talent, you at least have some things in place to help these players progress as
yeah,
opposed to what it was in the past, which was nothing like that. It was let's acquire some young talent and hope they figure it out on their own.
yeah,
No surprise that they're running it back on a rebuild because that's not going to work.
yeah.
This has a better chance of working, but we'll just have to wait and find out.
It's a different type of spending, and I'm with you on the fan perspective. Like, fans want to see every single dollar on field. I get it. And that is the most concrete way to see spending. But there are other ways to spend, and it's a long burn. It's a slow burn. And I'm with you. We'll see if it works, and we'll see if resources were allocated appropriately. And it seems like they're putting, these prospects that they just got, because they're getting talent. Like, I'm thinking about Dylan Head and Starlene Kaba being on an identical timeline, and that gets me really excited.
Oh
Let's
yeah,
see what type of resources they have to blossom into possible future stars in Miami.
more than nothing, which is
Yeah.
what the guys had before. So
Yeah. There you
it can
go.
only help.
Does this mean the Phillies still look to trade Ranger, or do they run out an opening day five of Wheeler, Nola, Sanchez, Luzardo, Ranger, and Painter is ready?
I think you roll with that.
That's gross.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, injuries happen, things happen. You also could roll to a 6 man if you wanted to and
Yeah.
preserve Wheeler as he ages and some of these, and even Nola as well. Or then you move teams, have pitchers go down all the time. You could move Ranger in June, and I'm sure teams would be lining
Yeah.
up and you could get some talent that way too. They're in a great spot. I love what Dombrowski's doing, man. You can't say that they've done anything wrong, essentially. Like it's just, again, when he gets to the playoffs, it's a little bit of a crapshoot there. He continues to make this team better each year.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. So the Phillies, I mean, I don't know what the final offensive piece looks like for them, but they are near flawless. Last thing we wanted to hit on, unfortunately, learned about the passing of Rickey Henderson this weekend. Rickey, obviously one of the greatest players to ever do this, died at 65 years old. Hall of Famer, MVP, 10-time All Star, two-time World Series winner, 3 Silver Sluggers. This guy stole 100 bases 3 times. He led the league in stolen bases 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 straight years, and then 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 times overall. 1406 is the career stolen base total. That's the most in Major League history because, of course, it is. 2295 was the runs scored total. That's the most in Major League Baseball because, of course, it is. And he had a career OBP of 401. This guy played for so long, and he was so good at taking second and third on you, but everybody put him on base because he had an elite eye.
Yeah.
Um, as I'm sure you guys know, I work with Howard Kelman in Indianapolis, who's been there for 48 years, and he's been watching baseball since 1959. And whenever I bring up Rickey, he says, without a doubt, that is the greatest leadoff hitter in Major League history. And
Yeah.
he was a star in every sense of the word. So that was really unfortunate to hear about Rickey's passing. And Kevin Henry put together a great article remembering Rickey
Yeah.
on jspaceball.com that I highly recommend you guys go read. And that link is in the episode description.
66 bags at 39 years old
Yeah.
is just amazing stuff. And this is before we had rules in place to make it easier, right? And um, I mean, Rickey is that marketable star that I think baseball has long been searching for, and
Yeah.
and a guy that I mean just embodied. I think what you want out of your leadoff hitter, both on and off the field, like the moxie and the persona and the nobody's better than me. Like I can't imagine what kind of tone hitting behind Rickey Henderson would set for you. Just knowing that the guy that's going up to bat for just set the tone game wise is either going to grind out an AB and get on base and then swipe second, and also knows that he's the best player on the field, or he's going to sneaky go deep. Like talking about leadoff home runs too. Like he
Right.
could do that for you as well. Like that's another underrated wrinkle. He was 3 homers away from 300
Yeah.
in his career. Like this guy did so many different things so amazingly well. A lot of hilarious quotes, hilarious stories. Like people used to mess with him and say like, "Oh, I'm gonna break this record for you," or "I could have had you. I would have been able to throw you out," or whatever. And like,
Yeah.
he wouldn't even blink. It wouldn't. It's just like, no, you wouldn't. And like he knew, yeah, you wouldn't.
He
But
was one of the best. Like he was the first I'm him guy that I remember hearing about in baseball, and
oh yeah,
he was him, and like he was ready to tell you that he was, and it wasn't from a place of arrogance. It's just like I'm
I
that
know what
guy.
you're.
Like I've worked
Yeah,
really hard to get to where I am, and I'm gonna prove to you that I'm the best. It almost feels like I honestly, this is an insane compliment given to Anthony Edwards, but this is the Anthony Edwards thing.
yeah. Which again, you just don't see in that kind of way where it's not arrogant. It doesn't rub you the wrong way. It's just I know how good I am, and I'm gonna keep to myself. But like if you
Yeah.
ask me, I'm gonna tell you how damn good I am,
Right.
and that's the really cool part. But this is one of those players that born in '97. He played till 2003. I don't really have much, real life recollection of. Obviously, seen so much video of. He's among the top of the list of players that I wish I could have just been
Yes.
born a little bit earlier to see. Jeff
Yeah.
Conine has told me so many hilarious stories about Rickey, like unintentionally hilarious. Like he was just one of those guys that could, I think, make you laugh and have a lot of fun in the clubhouse as well. But clearly was all business, won a couple World Series, and is one of the best to ever do it. So a lot of times we say like gone too soon, and a guy who lived to 80 something years old. In this case, unfortunately, 65 years old, gone way too soon for one of the best players we've ever seen, and by all accounts, one of the better, advocates of the game and people that you just love to see around the field, no matter what field it was.
Yep. Baseball world is going to miss Rickey Henderson, who accumulated 111 career WAR. Wow, man.
There'll never be another Rickey.
Nope. Every link you need is in the episode description. We will be back to talk to you guys about the Phillies and the Mets on Wednesday.